He's the lawyer.
But I'm judging stories today.
Yes, you are.
Mhm.
Join us to judge these stories. Pretty much analyze the stories with us on WhatsApp 0809 444 0981.
And you can also send us messages on Twitter. Follow us at Smooth981FM. Use the hashtag freshly pressed 981. We're streaming live on YouTube. Search for us there, Smooth 98.1, and also use the live chat option to chat with us. All right, let's move on to our very first story for this morning, and it's taken from the Punch newspaper. Police army to tackle Shi'ites like IPOB, says the presidency. So, yesterday, in an interview on Channels Television, Sunrise Daily program, the senior special assistant to the president on media and publicity, Garba Shehu, said that that with the prescription of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, also known as Shiites, security agencies have the power to take any necessary action against the group, as was done to members of the indigenous people of Biafra by Nnamdi Kanu. Ikemesit, can you please tell us what the implications of this are?
Okay, so first up, I think there is something that we need to make clear about.
Please make it clear.
Yeah, your introduction. In the story as it's written in the Punch, any necessary action is in air quotes.
Yes,
and I think that's the first red flag. So there were a couple of things that were slightly problematic about Garba Shew's time on channel television yesterday. First up is that he was asked by the federal why the presidency hasn't obeyed the 2016 Federal High Court order, which mandated the unconditional release of the leader of the IMN, that's Ibrahim El-Zakzaky. And he said it was a complicated issue. So essentially his argument was that El-Zakzaky was granted bail on just one of the matters where it was being held, but it was not granted bail on other matters. And for anybody with half illegal brain, let alone those who are actually lawyers in this is actually a non-satisfactory explanation, really. If there is a subsisting order from a court of competent jurisdiction that sat down and has weighed all of the possible angles of a particular situation and has determined that a person who hitherto had not been accused or has not had any problem with the law should be granted bail. He should be granted bail, which again piggybacks to the proscription order, which came through, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? So the argument has been that the argument has gone along the lines of why the federal government is essentially cherry picking which court orders to obey. So there is an order for 2016 saying you should free this man. You haven't abided by it. There's now a court order essentially labeling them a terrorist organization and prescribing them. And you're already implementing that. And the fact that he's compared the potential treatment of this group to IPOB, and if you circle back to 2017, the heavy-handed treatment of IPOB by the hands of security forces, the fact that the folks like the patron of the organization, Nnamdi Kanu, on the ground and all of that, and the way that led to a rising spate of insecurity in the eastern part of the country, it does not bode well. Really. It does not bode well. In the first place, without a prescription order, the security agencies have handled the IMN in a very heavy-handed manner. Sound alarmist for Tuesday morning, but if for those of us who remember our Boko Haram history, what was it fundamentally rooted? It was in heavy-handed security behavior to this group, which granted espoused views which were outside of the mainstream norm, but then again they weren't really disturbing anyone at the time.
I have a question for you. How alternatively, or how best could the federal government have handled IMN better? So some people have criticized the fact that they've been quite heavy-handed with them, and now they've been proscribed by the federal government following the court order. How better could they have been handled?
So there was a particular window, especially in the beginning. So let's backtrack. How did this really become a situation? We had the incident in 2016 between members of the group and a military convoy that reportedly at the time included the then chief of army staff, at the time, and then there was a violent clash. So they were accused of blocking the roadways, or at least that was the army side of the story. These other people said they were just making a procession, and then the convoy happened to pass, and then they reportedly got the order to, quote unquote, deal with them. There was a window where they could have been brought to the table, right? They could have been talked with, reasoned with, probably granted some concessions. The interesting thing is this: members of IMN practice a form of Islam, which isn't practiced by the majority of Nigerian Muslims. It's Shia Islam. The majority of Nigerian Muslims are Sunni Muslims, as you were. And there has been, since the 70s, there has been tension here in Nigeria, mostly gone under the radar, between Sunni and Shia Islam, as it were. And so this particular situation is rooted in that fundamental contradiction, and a lot of people who are at the forefront of determining an security policy around managing IMN are, and we cannot ignore this, Sunni Muslims. So that also.
Thank you very much, ikemesit. Okay, we'll move on to our next story here from The Guardian. At Peace Summit, Abubakar others seek dialogue to end insecurity. This is an update. Yesterday we talked about the fact that, the main story yesterday was that the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, SMBLF, had said they were not going to attend, rejected the invitation based on the fact that Miyetti-Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria were also invited. They felt it was a grave insult to them, and a number of them, we analyzed this yesterday and actually even spoke about this during Lagos Talks 981. Now, yesterday was the first day. It's taking place yesterday and today. And just a few updates from there. A few notable Nigerians were there. So please, can you just tell us what happened on the first day from this day?
Yeah, so essentially, to my mind, it's my impression, and this is a fairly substantive story. If you have the time, please go check out today's Guardian that dealt exhaustively with all of the matters arising from it. And so it was essentially a roll call of, some of Nigeria's most prominent elites, where essentially they were sitting down and they're trying to make sense of the rising state of insecurity in the country. I'll just say in passing, it's interesting to me that the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, which is essentially like an umbrella body of a lot of the social-cultural and political pressure bodies in the southern part of Nigeria, decided not to go here. And I'm looking at the list of folks. You have people like Edwin Clark from the Pan-Niger Delta Forum. You've got leaders from Afenifere, from Ohanes Ndibo, from the Middle Belt Forum, especially in the case of Pandef, and to a much lesser extent, Afenifere. These are groups that, even though they haven't directly been involved in historically in some of the security situations that we've dealt with in this country, they've certainly profited politically from it. You think about especially Edwin Clark essentially being a go-between during the Yaradua era, at a time when the militancy situation in the Niger Delta was, at its highest point. Coming out to say that they don't want to sit down with another group which right now is sponsoring the latest round of insecurity. It just feels a little,
well, not sponsoring.
They've been heavily associated with them. Okay, we can change the nomenclature and use that word. So it feels a little hypocritical, as it were. So I can understand the need for justice, right, impelling them to do this, but a lot of the security challenges we have in this country will be resolved outside of the security plane. It would happen by political engagement and dialogue, and it will necessarily mean that we might have to sit down with people that we might not necessarily like or be chummy about, or like some of the decisions that they've made on an organizational level, but they are also stakeholders.
All right, thank you very much. I have a question to ask. Based on one of the chieftains of the APC's comments, Mr. Fuad Oki, he mentioned that, well, there was no point going for these kind of meetings because at the end of the day, it's just a deliberation, and at best, they'll make a suggestion to the federal government, and it's up to the federal government to either accept or reject. Citing, some of them have cited the 2014 tab, saying that a lot of money was spent. A number of high high-profile delegates were brought from across Nigeria. A report was made, a recommendation was made. Nothing has been done. So what's the point of gathering again another set of leaders, of people from different parts of the country, and bring them together and bring in a recommendation that might not be, followed through?
I almost feel like the APC chieftain, Mr. Fuadoki, read my article. So back when I used to do a lot of political writing in 2014 at the height of the confab, I literally wrote a piece that said this will not work. And primarily my argument then at the time was that one, a lot of the things that were being suggested were politically inconvenient and we just didn't have the political will to implement it. But secondly, the confab did not have any coercive backing. So no government, no administration had any real legal obligation to follow those recommendations. And that was a conference that was called by the administration then at the time. And I made those arguments. This, as far as we're concerned, are just private citizens who have in the past held prominent political positions just coming together and talking about the situation in the country. It's essentially a glorified, not to really reduce the importance of it, but it's just a glorified beer pal. It's like freshly pressed on steroids. Wow, basically.
No,
interesting. No,
I'm just
another analogy, please. Emeka from Ojo says, "Good morning. IMN is equal to Khan. Will Shi'ites, while Shi'ites is equal to a particular church? Please clarify which one government proscribed Shiites or IMN. Government proscribed IMN members, not IMN in general." That's Emeka's thoughts or sentiment regarding that. We have very interesting, Henry. Thank you so much for your message, though. Vic, that's Charlie. Charlie says, "Do you know the monster in this IMN at all? Take a trip to Zaria, and you find out just that it's just about making noise on radio with these stories. An organization on a peaceful protest that blatantly shoots a serving police officer trying to maintain peace."
Okay, all right.
Vincent Emeka here from Adebasari says, "An opportunity, and any good opportunity should be exploited or used or employed to settle any dispute. I hope there is no hidden agenda by these groups for not coming." So I hope so.
I hope so too. All right, let's move on to our next story very quickly. Infrastructure, we can't do all the work in 4 years, says the immediate past Minister of Power and Housing, Babatunde Raji Fashola SA. And from the Vanguard newspaper, ikemesit, can you take us through the story?
I almost want to say no, but
we're not sure.
The second word is not safe for one in radio, so I would rather not. Because when he initially came into
6 months,
this office, he promised. You remember that promise?
Yep.
Yeah, we'll fix power in 6 months. We'll do this. We'll do that.
It was such a short-lived optimism.
It was, but then at the time, the argument that a couple of us were making was that you are knowledgeable. You were a governor of Nigeria's most important state for 8 years. You had a front row seat to understand and appreciate the difficulty and the scale of the work that had to be done. You shouldn't be saying things like that. Now suddenly we can't do the work in 4 years. Like, everybody knew that. You have a situation where just last week, a lot of the Gencos, this is an interesting situation where Valentine is trying to hold himself in, and it's not me, so I'm really loving this. But you have a situation where just last week a lot of the Gencos said the problem with power is right now we are creating generating capacity that a lot of the discos aren't taking because we have infrastructural problem. We've got a situation in works where contracts are insanely inflated, as due to a mixture of grafts and just the fact that general inflation in the economy is haywire. You've got a 17 to 20 million housing unit deficit right now in the country. Of course it won't take 4 years. And Fashola in these articles said the solution really is to get more credits, right? Ideally from Nigerians. And so again, that circles back to the entire conversation around borrowing and the scale of borrowing that has happened within the last 4 years, which if you look at the numbers, they don't really occur to me, and they don't really come to me right now. But SBM recently crunched the numbers, right? Our debt to GDP ratio has increased by astronomical multiples, as it were, and that's something to watch. But the thing is this: borrowing alone won't solve the problem. We need to solve some of the structural issues around procurement, around contracting, around just you hear some numbers and they're just absolutely out of the way. You know, it costs 10 billion to construct a 40-kilometer stretch of roadway. I mean, that's unsustainable really in the end, and so we need to tackle some of the more structural issues.
All right, thank you.
Quick message here. Yemi Richard says the only window that existed and still available for the federal government to release the leader of the Shi'ites based on the court ruling, you cannot undermine the judiciary and not expect backlash. Thank you, Yemi Richard. Vic says, okay, we've taken this message earlier. Please keep your messages coming into WhatsApp 0809-444-0981.
Right, next one here. Civil society groups kick against ex-Attorney General of the Federation, Malami's nomination as minister. Premium time. So a few reactions coming in from Senate interviews of our nominated ministers, and now some civil society groups have come to say no, we don't want him back.
Yeah, and rightly so. And okay, so I'd have to be somewhat careful here about what I say, because you know we are in the same profession and all of that. But the point is this: the general consensus is that in the pantheon of attorneys generals that we've had in this country, Abubakar Malami would rank as one of our most underwhelming. And I'm using underwhelming is the most charitable word I can use. There are 10 other synonyms of underwhelming, right, that I can deploy here, which would more accurately describe Malami's situation, where literally in his Senate confirmation, he said, and this is directly from the article on Premium Times, I'm not making this up, Lagos. He said, why many Nigerians remain in custody after they've been granted bail by competent courts is that a person can still be denied. The state can still detain a person who has been granted bail if it believes that person was a threat, rather, to state security. And the question is, you have an entire department called the Ministry of Justice, and you have professional prosecutors whose only job is to convince court judges that B are a threat to the peace, good order, and security of the state, and therefore they should be incarcerated and they should remain under state custody. If you lost that argument in court, you can't come out and say you have determined by yourself that this person remains a threat. That means you didn't do your job well. So essentially, he's outed the people that he supervises, his colleagues, and saying they're not doing a good enough job in the courts, therefore we need to extrajudicially detain people in custody. That's how low the standards have become, and that's why the civil society groups, and quite frankly a lot of lawyers who still have their thinking caps on, look at the AGF and wonder. In fact, when the list came out and I saw his name, I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Here we go again, right?
All right, thank you very much, ikemesit.
Interesting messages here we have on WhatsApp. Emeka sent in this one from Okoko Michael. Trying to get to this one in a bit, but please keep them coming. 0809-444-0981. It says, Fashola and Kayam, for me, they're best among the others. Okay, vote of confidence there. This other one. This one says, from Oluwatade Samuel Ayorinde, he says, what is wrong with our country? I think if our elders want to step in to correct what is going on the land, they should do it with wisdom. Call Miyetti-Allah to the meeting calling them still baffles me. Our present ministers should quickly come in to rescue this country from imminent disaster hanging on the nation, though many are denying the fact that the condition is not up to that, but it is good to do what is right really early. For us to be proactive is really what we should encourage. At 10 minutes before 8 o'clock, let's take in the first, second, and third phase of this the drainage reclamation, so to speak. As the weather is changing, we know that many states are experiencing flooding right now as we speak. But can I say your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so for those of our brothers that live in the Ikeja area and the Mushin area of town, and also in parts of Lekki, which is where essentially the first phase of this drainage clearing will occur, a drainage clearing team or whatever it is they are styled, is coming to a place near you. I just have a quick question. Why is this happening now in the high season, in the high point of the world?
They said better late than never, huh?
Well, yes, better late than never, but even better than late is doing it on time, as it were. We know that as certain as the sun rises and goes to sleep at night, we will have a dry season, we will have a wet season.
Okay.
Lagos has traditionally had issues and problems, well-documented problems with drainage. At this time last year, around this period last year, people were padding their news on Amadu Bello Way, for crying out loud. So we knew that this was going to happen. Why is it taking this long?
It hasn't become that bad yet, I guess.
Should I say kudos to us?
No, I'm just.
I'm not feeling
I mean,
that. I'm not feeling that charitable.
But what will
this
make
morning.
you happy? I mean, this. Are you knocking this move?
No, I'm not knocking. No,
I'm.
of course, I'm precisely saying it's late in coming.
Yes.
I'm not knocking the move in and of itself. I'm knocking the timing of it. We had a window to get this done. You could make the argument, oh, it was an election year and blah 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 blah.
But today's 30th, so we're very close to the August break, I guess. So maybe this is.
We've already had a mini August break in mid-July.
Really?
Yeah, right. Yeah, there was like a 7-8 day period where it was just drizzles.
You're part of town, not mine. Well, let's go.
Oh, you posh people, you're enjoying the rain. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on now, this next story from Thisday newspaper. Federal government signed Lagos. They've signed an agreement to end the dispute on waterways. So it was between these two agencies of government, NIWA and LASWA. The NIWA being the national arm and the LASWA being the Lagos state arm. So they've ended this dispute. They've decided to come together to own the joint responsibility to ensure safety, harmonize tariffs, and monitor regulations on the waterways. How do you see this relationship playing out, ikemesit?
Well, I hope it plays out well. I mean, I'm just looking at the story, and there are a couple of things that aren't exactly clear to me. So if you read the story in today's Thisday, you would recognize that this dispute started over a decade ago and actually ended up in the courts. Now, it's not clear from this reporting if this particular agreement means that the legal dispute itself in the courts has ended, because the governor, you have to get that correctly. Okay, the newer boss, right? Let me not misquote him.
Yes.
Actually said, and this is a direct quote, that we don't need the courts to intervene in ensuring safety on waterways and protecting the rights of our people and avoiding multiple taxations. So does that mean this is an out-of-court settlement? It's not clear. It's not stated in the story, right? This could be a gentlemanly agreement, and there are other substantive issues that are remain in court. Yes. And secondly, this deal doesn't really say anything about infrastructure. So it talks about safety, it talks about taxation, it talks about managing tariffs, as it were. It talks about other regulations. It doesn't really talk about infrastructure, which I suppose is the big issue.
That's right.
Our waterways are underutilized. The fundamental means of transportation in Lagos, one of the world's premier coastal cities, should necessarily involve, our waterways. Yes, exactly. And Lagos's geography is unique in the sense that we've got a lot of creeks and lagoons, and it's just not like a straight sea coast, right? Which is very rare in this part of Africa, which is why Lagos is a port, as it were. And so there are multiple points of entry and exit. You've got the potential to build, all sorts of water stations and and transportation nodes and channel points. And I think that was really what I was looking for. It's not clear if this covers that or if there is a plan for dealing with that.
I guess we'll celebrate this point, the baby steps until we get there. Hopefully tomorrow we'll see another story.
We tend to get stuck on our baby steps, though. That's the challenge.
New Telegraph for you, pessimistic ikemesit. Lagos Assembly probes Ambode over the abandoned N7bn Renal Centre. So it's the cardiac renal facility at the Bagada General Hospital in Lagos. They said, when I say they, I am referring to the acting chairman of the House Committee, Honorable Akin Shokule. He wrote a report that, kind of like, did an overview of the facilities that they have available in Lagos and how well they are performing, the staffing, infrastructure and all. And they highlighted the need to probe how much investment went into this structure itself. Your thoughts on this?
So this renal center, first and foremost, this new Telegraph story doesn't really do justice to it. If you go to places like Premium Times actually has a blow-by-blow investigation, which I was trying to look through before the producer dragged me upstairs. But what I was able to spy on, right, and I found out was that this renal center was actually built not under Ambode but under Fashola. So so this problem should officially be classed as a systemic problem, and I think this probe is very important, is very relevant. It couldn't have come at an important time in a situation where we are in a country where healthcare delivery isn't exactly world class or even Africa class, if there is a term like that, because you can get really good healthcare in several other African countries, right? Investing this much resources in the renal center, which would have gone a significant way in addressing a very, very important health issue with respect to kidney failures, dialysis and all of that. Can you keep track of the number of times people make call outs on social medias for operations of this kind? And we have a facility that could hypothetically address these situations right here in Nigeria, right here in Lagos, right? And it's essentially, according to Honorable Shokunle's report, it's essentially been comatose. It's really worth asking the questions. Why?
But should it be Ambode who's the focal person, or shouldn't it be Fashola himself? Okay.
So the thing is, reportedly under Ambode's administration, a renovation of the facility was done. New equipment was brought in. In one instance, of the cardiorenal machines, the report says only worked for 2 weeks before the entire facility was locked up. And right now, the entire facility is under lock and key. Bagada Hospital is ostensibly a government-run institution. Is what asking why?
And eyewitnesses say grass is overgrowing the place around. Very shameful.
Yeah.
Daily Times has this report. Miyetti-Allah embraces peace dialogue in Zamfara, according to the government there. They said the initiative was introduced by the state government to end banditry, kidnapping, and other forms of criminality. And how do you perceive this move? Is it to change the narrative on Miyetti-Allah, or is just a section of the country celebrating their wins while the other bickers?
I don't know if this is a substantive move. I mean, the story is little on actual substantive details and more on aspirations, as it were. So you would remember, was it not the Zamfara state governor recently that called for a fast or a statewide prayer to deal with the situation, and then all of us got on his case. The point is, I don't know if there's any substantive groundwork happening on the ground. Zamfara is very challenged from a security standpoint, as it were. And like we said earlier in the earlier story where we talked about the dialogue that is being championed by the former head of state, a lot of this problem the solution to this problem will be rooted in finding a political solution and also addressing the economic issues that underpin and feed the current insecurity paradigm. And it might be hard for a lot of our listeners to hear this, but Miyetti-Allah and its likes will be a fundamental part of that solution. We can't just ignore that fact.
Ifama from Ikoyi says, an adult making baby steps is equal to a shuffle, a dance going nowhere. The two agencies need to sit up to be responsible and put in place the necessary moves to activate the potential of Lagos Waterways. Thank you.
Thank you
very much, Ifama. Imo says, why is fact and truth based on overwhelming evidence always dismissed as pessimism?
Please,
that's because
louder.
It sounds like it sometimes.
Louder.
And NBC thinks you're just great. To say analyst judge Ike is just great. Can't wait for a collabo between him and Chata. They've had a couple of times.
A number of times, yes.
Grass in the BC.
We thank you so much, ikemesit. I meant to Lagos though, but your name came into my mouth. Well, thank you very much, ikemesit.
I will take it.
On the show. He's
saying that it's a rarity coming from you.
All right, you're done though. Next, we talk entertainment inside of the Grapevine. Keep it here, Smooth 98.1.
One pay back.